Hello everyone, hope everybody is doing well. So, I have been talking about immigration a lot in many of my recent videos. And there are a lot of politicians and of course media outlets that have been spewing propaganda nonstop about immigration. They tell us, oh, they're doing jobs that Americans won't do, oh, that they're paying a lot in taxes, that there's hardly any crime issues. And then they tell us in this article that we need them to encourage economic growth. BS. First of all, economic growth does not necessarily benefit the average person. You can have lots of economic growth, but the average person is actually doing worse. We had lots of economic growth since the early 1970s, but the average person has actually suffered quite a bit. That's a fact. And you have this scumbag media outlet as the New York Times, where I will give credit actually. The New York Times did expose the border crisis. But in a lot of their articles, they spew out lots of misleading propaganda. And they said, well, we need lots of growth so that population and especially the large cities can grow. Well, the reality is that they need that population growth so that politicians and businessmen and many other figures can look good, because a higher number makes the politicians, particularly election campaigns, stand out pretty well. If you take a look at here in Las Vegas, we had lots and lots of population growth during the 1990s and 2000s, but what they don't tell you, it was a direct or indirect effect of immigration. That is the sad reality. But they say, oh, well, we're the fastest growing city. Well, we're doing a good job. Oh my gosh, just come here to Las Vegas. Well, data can be very, very misleading. Now let's go down to the article. As the United States debates the right levels of immigration, as whether President Trump suggested, new census data shows that international migration is keeping population growth above water in much of the country. Well, first of all, just because population levels come down doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Because if you're looking at an area that's very, very expensive and an area that has lots of traffic, then less population can actually mean a good thing. But oh no, because a lot of business people and a lot of politicians, when they see their population levels come down, they actually make people believe that, well, something wrong is with their state. The economy is bad. It's a lot like Detroit. Yeah, GDP is falling. The economy is bad. But that doesn't really explain the whole enchilada. Now, although international migration dropped in 2017 and 18, it accounted nearly half of the overall population growth in 2018, as birth rates declined and death rates rose. Now, first of all, this proves that the Trump administration is doing something. So if you're tired of massive immigration, this just shows you that Trump is getting something done, although I think that he's not doing enough. But we'll have to see later in his first and second term. But they say, well, birth rates are declining and death rates are rising. Hey, how about women having more babies? How about we control feminism and stop the destruction of males that have turned into gangsters and soy boys so that families can be built? We change the family court system, the welfare system. We bring back the single income household. And we make sure that millennials get prepared in the real world so that birth rates can actually increase. Maybe that is a better idea, rather than actually harming the average American and use immigration as an excuse to jack up the population. And by the way, immigration doesn't help because taxes go up to support them and schools get overcrowded, and this encourages Americans to have less children. Now, if you look at many of the major cities in our public schools, immigrants are a disproportionate amount of our public school system. And I can show you in a number of articles later on about what's exactly that's happening. And actually, believe it or not, we can actually take a look at the Center for Immigration Studies. So you can see here this is the map of showing how much immigration has impacted our public schools as proportion of population, particularly their children. And so you can see here, they tell us, well, we need more and more immigration, but they are flooding, overflowing our public schools. Now, this is Las Vegas, as you can see here. Let's take a look at the central part, which is where the strip aligns itself. And you can see here, students from immigrant households at 71%. The poverty rate is 47%. Yet native households is only 31%. The poverty rate of all students is 42%. And by the way, this is very alarming because we fund their reduced lunches. And you can see here, number one sending country, Mexico, El Salvador. Number one foreign language, Spanish. Number two, Swahili. Well, where could that be? That probably exposes a lot of African migrants who are driving in the taxis and working in the casinos. And that's certainly having an impact on the public schools that we get. So just going back to this article right here, as you can see here, they tell us, oh, well, we need more immigration. Internal migration helped rural counties. Well, I'm pretty much alarmed with that because I think they're promoting this diversity, aka replacement, into rural counties, well, because they're too white. And you can see here that even the largest metro areas, and by the way, they're moving there because it's affordable. So these immigrants drive up the cost of housing to a certain extent, and then they move to the rural areas. That's why North Dakota and many of these other states are experiencing high percentage of change of immigration. And then they even admitted that without immigration, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago would be losing population. Well, guess what? We need them to lose population because they're so overcrowded. They're so unaffordable. And by the way, it's these scum politicians that need these high home prices, first of all, because it benefits the landlords and the real estate developers and many other special interests that benefit from it, but also it boosts their property tax revenue. And why also they need it? To get votes. The more votes that they get, they can promote their corruption, their higher taxes, their higher public employee salaries and pensions, regulations that devastate our economy, you name it. They need these immigrants, and they're replacing the population. So in other words, native-born people move out, immigrants flood in. Now, as they admitted that 44% of the nation's population would be in shrinking countries, believe it or not, instead of the current 27%. But again, America has 320 million people. Why the hell do we need more people? That's enough. I don't want my country to be like India and China. That should be one of the best excuses probably to tell people about immigration. Now let's go down here. Causing local businesses to fail and young people to leave in search of opportunity. Now, just because local businesses fail does not mean it's a horrible thing. Because again, once again, I'm going to tell you one more time, the most important thing about the economy is the standard of living of the average person. So just because GDP is falling in the country or in some areas, that does not mean the average person is doing worse. As a matter of fact, those people who leave probably have better opportunities. Now, yeah, it's sad to see ghost towns, but people just move on. Now, let's look at these statistics. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, they're experiencing massive population growth due to immigration. Now, I can tell you that Miami has had a lot of problems with immigration, considering the fact that a lot of these people do not speak English. And by the way, don't they tell you about how much of an impact it has on the environment? When immigrants move into a certain area, others move out. It leads to natural separation, segregation, and that has a lot of impact on the environment. Sprawl, homes being built, resources being mined, lands being destroyed, asphalt, pollution, you name it. A lot of that has an impact. And look at this, they're flooding into these small towns. They're spreading them everywhere. Pullman, Washington, Brookings, South Dakota, another one in South Dakota, Iowa, another one in Iowa. Now look at this. This is what really pisses me off. San Jose, Silicon Valley. They said, oh, well, we need immigrants to pump up population growth. Hello? San Jose has an unaffordability problem, for heaven's sakes. So the last thing we need is more people. And you know how hard it is to build things in the Silicon Valley? Height restrictions, land restrictions, CEQA laws. So you're here to tell me that we need more immigrants to pump up population, which jacks up real estate problem? Folks, this is where the problem is. This is one of the reasons, probably the main reason why our home prices keep rising. This New York Times article is a propaganda misleading tool, and you guys should throw away this piece of garbage. My goodness, when are people finally going to wake up? And as we go down the article, although that is an eclectic list of places, it's a clear geographical pattern. Internal migration contributes to population growth. And again, population growth does not necessarily mean that it's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, often it means a good thing, but that is not always the case. And you can see your international migration, which includes immigration and other international moves, is very important for population growth. And you can see here, a lot of metros have been experiencing a large decrease in domestic migration. And that's what we need, because these large cities are corrupt. They need to be punished, particularly like California, because it's so unaffordable, all the high taxes. They need to get a slap on their face. Their cycle of corruption needs to fall. Now, at least the good news is a lot of the wealthy people are moving out of the inner cities because of the new tax policy. But then again, what you have to understand is that this shows you that people are dissatisfied with the cities. And they're using, basically, immigrants to replace them because they know that they will be naive and support their BS crap. Wake up, folks. And again, this number is falling. People are dissatisfied. And look at this. Births is now less than deaths, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to internal migration. It used to be the opposite. And by the way, those of you who are concerned about whites being a minority, what you guys need to do is have more children. Because that is the main reason, I believe, why the population is declining. So those of you who are listening to Red Eyes, Richard Spencer, Jared Taylor, have more babies. Because you can shut the borders all you want, but that's not going to mean much in the long run. It's going to be meaningless. So you can see here the growth in these areas slowed to the lowest rate in 2006. And Americans are leaving the urban counties all over as rising home prices and inadequate construction push people to more affordable areas. Well, that's what we need. We need less people. Look at this. 9 of the 51 metro of 1 million plus lost people in 2018. That's what we need. We need less people. Miami, Boston, San Francisco. The best thing that could probably happen to the city of San Francisco, considering there's crap all over the street, needles across the sidewalk, is less people, because their prices will fall and their system of corruption will tank. What's lifting up the corruption of Sacramento, the Gavin Newsoms, the Jerry Browns, is their high home prices. Now let's go down the article. As you can see here, it's generally the large cities that depend on it. And let's go down into the article. So there you have it. Domestic migration is negative. People are dissatisfied. And then higher density suburbs, not so much. And then you can see here, what this really exposes is not only that there's corruption, but people leave the cities because they're tired of the so-called multiculturalism, the conflict, the dissatisfaction. This just shows you perhaps another reason that diversity is failing you. Wake up. You know, just like Southern California, when all these so-called Latinos and Asians moved in, and then the whites kept moving further and further out. And then now it's at a point that whites really just don't have a place to be, unless if you're in the hilltop communities or in the coastal areas, which are really, really darn expensive. But here in Las Vegas, generally the outer fringe area you are, the whiter it is. That's the sad reality, and people are getting pissed off, folks. So as you can see here, there doesn't seem to be any comments, so looks like this article didn't gain a lot of traction, so perhaps that's a good idea that this propaganda is not really coming through. So anyway, tell me what you guys think. When you hear these articles, take it with a grain of salt, and a lot of news stories, just be aware that there's always a chance that propaganda or a lie is being taken place. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Please spread this video, and let's make sure that the New York Times and many of these articles and news sources get what they deserve. Thank you.